We had planned to only be here for about 12 to 18 months, and 33 odd years later, we're still here. And Denver's home. My parents have since moved back, but my brother and I continue to reside in the Denver area. So that's my quick background. From a professional standpoint, I've been in the IT industry for much of my career on high-end customer service, working on enterprise accounts in the data center co-location type of field. But as my side gig for a good 10, 11 years, I've been honestly obsessed with real estate and real estate investing, also on the Airbnb side, and just looking at multiple strategies for creating equity through home ownership. And I've looked at it in a variety of ways, and I'm still a big believer in the traditional way. But I look at other opportunities as well, and that's what I want to pass along to my community.
Awesome. How did you first get introduced into the real estate industry?
Yeah, well, initially really goes from my grandpa when I was really, really little. He just simply said, don't pay for someone else's mortgage. And that always resonated with me. He was I wouldn't call him a frugal guy, but just very smart. He was the guy that taught me to take the coupons and just be very smart with your money, and that there's no quick rich type of, or get rich quick type of schemes, but you really can get rich over your lifetime by making good financial decisions, and real estate was kind of the foundation of that. And so fast forward to about 2009, similar to what we're going through right now, Steven. It's, times are very uneasy for a lot of people. And in 2009, I didn't have a ton of money, but I kept telling myself, you know what? Getting into a home is the most important thing I can do. And honestly, it didn't really matter what sort of home I got into. And that was my foundation, because I bought something, and slowly over the first few years, I started fixing it up. And I lived in that home for a few years, and then bought another place. And that's kind of what got the ball rolling for me.
Cool. Doing the house hack a little bit, right? Is that what?
Yes, multiple versions of house hack, I would say. I mean, first of all, if you're just living in the home because honestly you can't afford anything else, and then you even go more simple by moving into one part of the home, and so you're not even utilizing even the footprint of the original home that you bought. But that 3-4 months of a little bit of pain is worth it in the investment in the long term. And I held onto that property for about 12 years, and I decided to move on that just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that's I've always wanted to do that. I haven't done that yet. Get like a 3-bedroom or something like that, and live in one room, rent out the other two.
As a younger single guy, I can get away with that. It gets tougher and tougher as you get a little older. That's why I've tried to employ other strategies that even work for families and people that just don't necessarily want to always do work on their home. I mean, we love to see these home improvement shows, and they're very buzzworthy. And if you have all the right pieces, that is another great strategy. And that's a strategy that I enjoy talking to potential home buyers about. But I try to mix technology with the current state of traditional real estate investing, or in traditional real estate home buying for that matter.
What are the right pieces for the investment side, do you think? What do people kind of need to put together to buy an investment property?
Well, would you also be referencing another property, or just buying a single property to start with? I think that's important to understand if this is the home you're planning to live in, or if this is truly an investment as a secondary purchase.
Yeah, I mean, I think both, honestly, because I know there's a whole bunch of people that are entering the home buying market, if you will, just kind of coming into that age, really kind of making that consideration of what is my first purchase for a property, what is my first purchase for a home, and then you also have people that have one and are maybe thinking about are hearing real estate's a really good way to invest, it's maybe the one piece of the missing portfolio, so they're making that consideration of investing into housing for a rental property. So I think there's definitely two different sides that can definitely be of value.
Yeah, and I think the first way I would answer it, look, we can turn on the TV, we can go on social media, we can go on so many platforms, and we see these get rich quick schemes type of thing. And that's why I used that word a little earlier. Look, real estate is very, very smart, but I believe that it's a long-term hold philosophy. Now, I'm not playing a lot of the flip game. That's a totally different marketplace, and so I'm looking at ways to hold something for quite a few years. Now, not to say that you can't sell it in 5 or 8 years if your situation changes, or you find something that is a little bit more better suited to your lifestyle. And that's why I like to talk about multiple strategies and what that could look like. But honestly, this is not a quick 6 months, 12-month plan. This is usually a 3 to 5 year plan, kind of on the minimum side. Whereas if you can plan to hold on to one of these properties for 10 or 15 years, that's where the true value comes, based on just long-term trends. And that's why if people have looked at properties from a long-term standpoint, yeah, maybe their 401ks, maybe their stock portfolios, they're probably suffering right now. But for the most of the Denver market, and really nationally, there really hasn't been that much of a housing price change. Now, there's a lot less homes going on the market and getting sold right now, but what we believe we're going to see is a lot of pent-up demand. So really, to go back to that original question you asked, yeah, you just have to plan for the long term, and yeah, you have to prepare your finances for that. And those are the conversations that we have with lending and mortgage individuals on the front end, because that decision has to be made hand in hand with the real estate decision. And honestly, if you're looking at it as a full approach, that's just what you'd be doing with your financial planner. I mean, it's a holistic approach to your long-term planning. You're not just buying a home. If you get a beautiful home that you love, that is perfect for your family, that checks off every box, but not everyone's looking for that exact item. And that's why you want to have that conversation.
Yeah. So you said really being able to prepare and having your finances in place for, I've looked into the real estate industry a couple of times. I've done my fair share of projects here and there, but there's a lot of people out there that the industry scares them, with the thought of, what's going on right now with the virus. I don't think Denver's seen too much of a drop in that industry. But 2008, that whole crisis, I think people kind of are in shell shock a little bit from that. And then they're also not thinking in terms of the investment. They're thinking of, I'm buying a house, right?
Yes.
So what's that like mental preparation that someone would need to do, and just kind of get a grip on what it actually means to have an investment deal?
Yeah, and I would kind of answer that in a couple ways. What we have to really remember right now is this is not an economic downturn. This is an economic hit because of a major health scare, a pandemic. I mean, this is, we can plan for downturns. You don't generally plan for something like this. However, in saying that, what we learned from 08, 09, and 2010, which is so important here, is the underbelly of the whole market. The loans that we've put out there, you have to be so much more qualified than you had to be 10 years ago. And the housing market, and then the loans themselves, from all the big banks to Freddie Mac to Fannie to all those underwriting larger government organizations, that's the foundation of everything that creates stability right now. And I'm a little biased in this comment, but I'm very much hoping that real estate will be one of those flattening factors or stability areas that just kind of carries us through, because people have more equity in their homes than they ever have before. Like, over 35% in the country of in the United States have full equity in their home. That means they own it completely outright. More than 53% own, multiple hundreds of thousands of equity in their home. And so they have a lot of flexibility when it comes to that platform. So just by knowing that as a foundation, that just means even during a pandemic, this is just a blip if you're smart for the long term. Now, if you're playing the short-term game, you could have been completely wiped out by this point. And not to say when you play the short-term game, you can't win, but you always have to be much more strategic than making longer-term, more financial savvy decisions. And that's why how your life changes and other technology strategies come in to really be able to address your changing lifestyles. And that's what I want to talk about the front end, because if you meet someone, if you have a child, even if you go through some tough times and losing a job, I want to talk about all those strategies that you can employ by buying that one home, that could just be your perfect family home for 30 years, but it doesn't have to be your only revenue stream.
Awesome. I like that. So is there, who are you working mainly with investors, first time home buyers? Like, talk about a little bit of who you're having these conversations with.
Yeah, I mean, my broad job is working in residential real estate. So I do speak to the gamut of people. What I truly specialize in are first-time home buyers. I do that very well. I'm on the east part of Denver, so I'm focusing in on the Stapleton Park Hill marketplace. So I know I'm kind of micro, I guess, targeting this area because I know this area. I look at the market demographics. So this part of Denver is a real key for me, and that usually comes from the home selling side. Now, the home buying side, a lot of times that happens a little bit more organically through your network, through your community, and those individuals can be anywhere. They don't necessarily have to be so laser focused in on this area. But Steven, it really makes me happy when people are looking at options for the future and they want to talk about house hacks with Airbnb or long-term rentals, and selfishly, if they want to look to this area because I know I can be the absolute expert in this area and help them along the way. And so, obviously, the more boxes you check off, the more of an expert you can become. But yeah, I try to focus in on this area and, with a broad enough approach to assist anyone across the greater Denver marketplace.
Awesome. For that area, have you seen, and really for the Denver area as a whole, have you seen any dip in the market or anything like that that has to do, or not necessarily has to do with the pandemic, but just people being scared, or what changes have you seen?
Yeah, it's a really important question right now. I mean, if you're talking to anyone in this business and they say we haven't been impacted, then they're completely, not telling the truth. I mean, we're still just kind of seeing the home. So the homes that were put on the marketplace in March, they were already in the process. People already had motivation to put it on the marketplace, probably because they had a need to move at that time. Now that need might have changed since they put their house on the market because of the domino effect of this pandemic. However, those transactions are still in place. Now we're trying to be a bit as responsible as possible, and we're not considered an essential service in the sense of trying to find net new business, but anything that's in place, we can have inspectors come in, appraisers come in, we can get, work with our title companies. Some people are still doing in-person closings for homes that have started the process before the most restrictive state orders came in place. However, anything net new, as I keep saying, we're not going to be following that. So the emphasis for our industry is focusing on virtual homes, virtual tours. I could still go over to a property and do an in-person tour, but I'd have to still be just simply on my own to do that, and obviously working very much hand in hand with the sellers and following all those CDC guidelines. So in terms of the hard numbers, yeah, the number of new listings is well down. That's not going to change, but what we're very hopeful for is that the spring is always, no matter what market you're in across the country, spring generally is the top marketplace, both because the weather's getting warmer, and second, a lot of people want to know where they need to be before August, September, before their kids' school goes back. And so they want to be in that location well ahead of time, and they want to enjoy it over the summer and just have that window of opportunity. So spring is always our biggest buying and selling season. And honestly, this was going to be a record season for residential home sales. Obviously, that's not the case right now. And so what we're hoping is that there's just a lot of pent up demand. And once people start getting a little bit more optimistic about both their own personal situation, and they still have the need to continue on with decisions that they would have done anyway before the pandemic, we're hoping we do in 9 months what maybe we should have done in 12 months. But, a lot to be seen with the current climate out there, but we're all hopeful that we're starting to get to the back end of this.
Good. So when you're doing tours of a home, are you doing it yourself with like a phone and here's the bathroom, here's the kitchen, or are you getting like a videographer or someone like that to go in and shoot the house? How is that process really working? Because a lot of that stuff is in person.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And honestly, coming from technology, it's an opportunity for me to say, all right, how can I use my background? Because I feel like, not that some of the techniques are dated, but there's a lot of competition out there. I'd be lying if you're not looking at some of these online platforms. And to address your question, that's where this industry need to go anyway. And honestly, this current climate has kind of forced us to pivot a lot faster than we probably would have, because we were just kind of doing a lot of these techniques in just traditional means. And so a lot of the virtual tours, when I say a virtual tour, that's usually a professional photographer going through with all his latest and greatest equipment, both taking still photos and then doing other types of videos or multiple still photos, so you can kind of get that the tour where you can guide yourself through the home. Now to move that a step further, yes, we've been doing in-person virtual tours just by my phone or by my colleague's phone. And then we've been also doing virtual open houses as well, where we're live on any one of the social media platforms and doing it live. Our MLS multiple listing service now allows us to link that in there, and then we can market virtual open houses to the public, just so we can have a quote unquote normal open house like we have in the past. Obviously, very socially distanced with online technology, but it's a new medium, and this is what I would say my generation and younger want to be, want to have as part of their overall vetting process. I mean, people come to the home buying process with more information than they ever have before. So that's where it takes someone expert in their field to kind of funnel the information. You have so many options now, and then you just got to get down to those 5 and 10 that really make sense, and also talk about all the strategies that you want to employ.
Yeah, the change, right, for the industry is,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm seeing that across all of them, really. A couple of years ago, when I was working with bigger business, some of their projects, some of their initiatives were, how can we implement a work from home benefit? Or, a lot of the older businesses that have been around for a while we're making that consideration. And it was just kind of like dipping their toe in the water, kind of feeling it out. Is this something we want to do? And now everyone is like, boom, we have to overnight. So a lot of what's happening right now is that like forced change. And it's really going to the businesses that are adapting, the industries that are adapting to a new way are the ones that are gonna accelerate, because you're right, the younger generation or the ones that are coming into the workforce are going to be like, I did everything from at home,
Yeah, we expect it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do too. It's a lot of this virtual stuff going on, and makes things quicker. Of what I've noticed, I can have a lot more meetings really. But if I can just sit here, and then it's back to, and I'm not driving around all over the place, and it doesn't replace the face-to-face. I definitely enjoy that better. But this, it serves a purpose as well.
But I think it also shows us that if we're more open to having these type of conversations, why can't we supplement this into our normal workflow once we get back to normal again, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
Yes, I still want to go grab a coffee with you and have a chat and really connect. But this is a nice medium as well. We're having the same sort of interaction, and I'm sorry I didn't support my local coffee shop, but to your point, much more efficient for the day. And I think those companies that have been so absolute on not offering it, at least approaching the mindset that this is part of a flexibility option and people can be just, if not more productive. I think that's our key going forward. And I think that's going to be a benefit that is caused from this work from home order.
Mm-hmm. I know signings have to be in person, right? When you're signing over a title, basically. Is that correct? Or?
Well, traditionally, almost always, yes, unless you have power of attorney. But usually that power of attorney generally has been in person, even if the owner or co-owner has not been there, but they've been given the right to be in person. A lot in the last few weeks, a lot of closings have still been done in person following a lot of best practices. Although we have been working with a few title companies that have been doing remote closings as well. And And that's a benefit that the industry probably need to get to anyway. There's still, there's still both sides of the equation that are going to be talking after the fact to say if this is something that we should be doing, from a liability standpoint, security standpoint going forward. But I just love that it's on the table. And through the entire real estate buying process, when we're negotiating now, I mean, something as simple as just DocuSign or other e-signing platforms have been so key that didn't really exist, throughout the whole industry, even just as soon as 5-8 years ago, right? And so that's been a step in the right direction. And honestly, this is just taking that final step and signing a ton of documents from a virtual standpoint, while being walked through in this sort of manner by all the appropriate parties, especially the title person, because they're key to all that paperwork, because as everyone should know, they're an independent entity as part of the final transaction, almost like a referee more than being a coach on one side of the transaction.
Just there to witness, or
there to witness, make sure everything goes smoothly.
Yeah. That's interesting. I know.
No personal fouls, no reviews.
Exactly. There are, a couple industries out there. The law sticks in my head as being one of those where they have that requirement. If you're signing any documents, it needs to be witnessed or get a notary or something like that. So it's going to be interesting to see how those industries adapt, especially if this goes on for longer. I know we're about 4 weeks in or so. 4 or 5 weeks in, and I think some industries are just holding their breath, and this has a possibility of going on even longer, so it'll be interesting to see how they adapt.
I taking it back to my industry, you can have a real estate licensee, but the next step is actually becoming a realtor, and that's a whole nother ethical level. But where I'm going with this comment is, when you work with a realtor, you're actually working with the largest individual trade association in the country. We have 1.41 million individual members in this trade association. So it's definitely one of the biggest. And to your point, I think it's one of those, you kind of have a little bit of your traditional hat on, and the whole industry's had to look at the climate differently. And that's where I think a lot of benefits are going to come from this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a big fan of change, and that's going to be a good. I see this as, for businesses that are coming out of it, as a positive thing in a way, for being able to be innovative. That entrepreneurial spirit, really being able to be a problem solver, and we're going to see some pretty cool things coming out of this, I think, in different ways to function and to do business.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head right there. I mean, you feel like, from, especially in any size company, but especially the small and medium-sized businesses, you have these wants out there, you have these projects, and you have these timelines. And then all of a sudden, something like this comes along, and this is not really a want anymore. It is an absolute need. And maybe if you don't take those actions, maybe you don't survive this, or you're just going to be years behind the curve of where you need to be. And so I'm hoping, as you just said, with those most entrepreneurial people, once they've taken those steps, hopefully they've got a business model that's in place that actually puts them in a better position. Yes, there might be pieces that need to be ironed out, but if you're resourceful, I like to think you can come out on top of this.
Yeah, I think so too. From what I do of working with small businesses and the owners of those, there's been some really cool innovation. A lot of people have been working on their processes, really kind of understanding what that is, and then figuring out, do they have the right people to move into the next phase of their business and that next stage. So it's cool to see, I think.
Yeah, this is not about technology. It's also about the people that will support the technology and the ideas that you have going forward. And you're a perfect example of talking to a large swath of businesses that are having to change their ways, and just the feedback you're getting from all the stakeholders that you're talking to is probably invaluable at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been fun, stressful, and a lot of stuff going on, but fun, in a certain way, right? It's problem solving, and that's what we like to do. So it's good that way. So from I think I have one last question for you
Sure.
here. I know you go in a couple different areas, from that long-term first home buyer, buying the family house to investments and that sort of thing. Are you seeing any differences within those industries? And I say industries is just to separate those two things out. But anything that is impacting one and maybe not the other, from like a rental short term or situation there versus like that longer term play.
Yeah, I mean the main thing right now is that when there's a stay-at-home order, travel very much suffers. Obviously, we're seeing it from the airline industries, and we've seen updates from a few of the major carriers that they're going to continue to need bailouts, and they're already cutting their flights all the way through some of them through June. So obviously, the trickle down effect of that stay home is that the Airbnb is a huge part of the travel industry, and so those individuals that are doubling down on Airbnb and other platforms like VRBO, yes, they're completely suffering.
Mm-hmm.
But where my clients are still okay in mass is that most people are buying properties with the option to pivot. And what I mean by that is that if they were doing short term, they can move it to what I like to call like an executive rental, which I generally say is about a 2 to 3 month, usually fully furnished, because you already have the furniture in there for short term rental. You just kind of migrate it to a different platform, and you kind of bring in another type of class. And sometimes that might not work based on this current situation. Sometimes people need a roof over their head and they're just local to the market. And so, yes, you might be taking a big month over month pay hit, but then you have to look at long-term options. And so when you're just not in one particular sector, I think that's the biggest piece. And so, yeah, when it comes to home buyers, they're mostly on pause right now. But as I said earlier, the pent-up demand, I feel pretty strongly will come back, and it's all about having those additional strategies for the future. And to answer the other part of your question, as an example, with the first-time home buyers, they if they didn't lose a job, they will be in a good position because interest rates are going to continue to be historically low. I've been on some calls with some lenders. Questions have been coming up about will there be other first-time home buyer stimulus incentives like we saw in 2009 and 2010. That's yet to be seen, but with interest rates so low, getting a starter home once we get out of this will be better than ever. And there's still plenty of FHA options and other government-supported initiatives that loan companies can go that direction. And so that's why, honestly, even before talking like someone like me, we want to get that lender and mortgage individual in, because this has to be a holistic conversation. This isn't just buying a single property. This is about looking at your financial health for the long term.
So you're bringing in the lender basically into the conversation when you're starting to engage with someone right away. It's not just you all the time.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's part of the education process. I mean, especially if you haven't done it before, you wouldn't know. You said, I want to buy a home. You've looked on the online platforms. You get excited about a few certain features, and then you want to go. But okay, we got to take quite a few steps back there and plan this out. And that's why, honestly, 2 or 3 months before we even start looking at actual properties, I want to have that holistic conversation. And even if they don't go with me, I want to be able to advise on the whole process and just give them a big picture. And if we give them the big picture, then that individual or family is going to make the best decision for themselves, because they will know who they need to work with. And then just give them a few gotchas along the way that I've learned over the years, and that plenty of my peers have also taught me.
Cool, Nate. How would if I was looking to buy a home,
Yeah.
either rental property or first time family buy, how would I get a hold of you? What would be some initial steps that you would recommend for me to take?
Sure. I mean, I'm on all the social media platforms from Facebook to Instagram. have my corporate website, but yeah, I mean, text, call, any way possible. I think we have a multitude of ways to get a hold of each other.
Mhm.
It's probably even doubled down during these efforts in our virtual times that there's almost probably too many ways to connect. But yeah, just reach out to me and we'll get the process started. I'm in the Park Hill, Stapleton part of Denver, working for Row Realty. And if it comes to a first-time home buyer or Airbnb options, or even if you're just still in your home and you just need to talk some strategy and you're not looking to buy or sell, I mean, that's still a great conversation to have, even if it's not a step you're going to take right now. It just gives you options for the future to make sure you're compliant with all the rules and regulations.
So you're being a resource for everyone, which
Absolutely. I mean, that's the best thing we can be.
yeah.
We all are kind of in this preserve mode right now, and this is not a time to be trying to push anyone into any service or product that they don't need. It's all about making sure your community is in a good spot, and information's power right now. And if you can stock up on this information and make some good decisions for the future, then I've done my job.
Awesome. Cool. That's great. There's from that first time home buyer standpoint, is would you recommend to buy right now? How are the rates looking, I guess?
Yeah, it's a common question. I mean, rates are at historical lows. I feel like you hear that on a radio commercial all the
Oh,
time. You always have to be careful about that because there's always additional fees in that, and so you definitely always want to talk to multiple lenders. But from a first time homebuyer standpoint, yeah, if you have those dollars ready to go, and it could be as little as 3.5% of the overall purchase price if we're talking FHA loans, and they're one of the best that you can get as a first time home buyer, and that's definitely one angle we would want to explore. But
mhm.
just even 2 to 3 months before you're ready to go, let's start to have that conversation and talk areas, talk strategies. And this process is so customized once you start asking some questions. There's no one size fits all, and honestly, that's what is great about my job, because every day I'm talking to people that are in completely different situation. Even if they're first time home buyers, one first time home buyer is not the same as the next, and how one person looks at real estate is very different than other person looks like as real estate, and how they look at lifestyle choices is very different. And yeah, it's just like we're doing as business right now. We want to look at that 3 and 5 year plan. That's the conversation I want to have with my clients or prospective clients, is that what does that 3, 5, and 15 year plan look like if you have that in mind. And it might not just be about that buy right now, but where do you envision yourself in 10 or 15 years on lots of different levels of your personal and professional world. And that's what makes a really empowering conversation, because then we can look back in 10 years and say, yeah, that was a really good strategy. As long as you're kind of following that template and of your goals, you're going to be able to reach that. And that's where the financial piece makes savvy real estate investing. And that's a lot of power right there, Steven.
Yeah, good. It's the rich dad, poor dad mentality too.
That's a great example.
Yeah. Well, cool, Nate. Thank you for talking to me with this. Super insightful. I can tell you're very, very passionate about that. I'll put your contact information on here too, so that people know where to reach you as well. Any other insights or tips that you might have for either a colleague, business owner, or for someone looking to purchase a home?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of options out there, and in this internet focused world, especially as we work from home, I mean, there's a lot of platforms out there, but the
Mm-hmm.
best thing that you can know anytime before looking into real estate is talk to a local expert in the market, and even better, talk to a hyper local expert in the market. And if you're able to do that, even if you're looking at these other platforms, this is where the fiduciary responsibility of being in the business, that in some cases that may be the best option for you, but in the vast majority, that's not going to be the case. And we're going to be able to talk through those options, because just like a quarterback, bringing in all the different players and being able to pull people together and work in a unified unit, that's what's going to be a powerful play for you, both in this purchase and then remaining with those connections for the long term, and just learning from those individuals. And so, yeah, talk to a local expert. That's the number one advice I can say before you look at any other options, because they will at least be able to guide you, and that'll be a great foundation for any decisions you make in the future.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you, Nate, again. Enjoy the snow that's going on.